Let's begin with something that's rarely acknowledged in most health conversations: that food is not neutral. What you eat is never just about calories, carbs, or convenience. It's a decision that affects your mental clarity, your emotional resilience, and yes, even your spiritual alignment. Whether you're conscious of it or not, the act of eating is deeply connected to the forces that shape your behavior, both seen and unseen. We live in a world where food has become weaponized. It's been engineered, packaged, and marketed not for nourishment, but for dependency. And here's the real problem. When you become dependent on something, you become easier to control. The devil doesn't need to take over your life with some dramatic possession. All he needs is a way to subtly dull your senses, lower your standards, and compromise your ability to choose what's good over what's easy. And often, that starts with what's on your plate. Think about it, food is one of the oldest battlegrounds for the human soul. In the Garden of Eden, it wasn't violence or greed that first fractured humanity's relationship with God. It was food. A choice to eat something that looked good, felt right, but carried a hidden cost. That's not just ancient history. It's a pattern. Over and over, we trade long-term wisdom for short-term gratification, and the enemy exploits that. Let's strip it back to something psychological. Your brain is wired for survival, not truth. It seeks pleasure, avoids pain, and conserves energy. So when you eat something hyper-palatable, that perfect mix of sugar, fat, and salt, your brain lights up like a slot machine. You feel rewarded, relaxed, comforted. But that pleasure isn't free. It trains your nervous system to chase dopamine instead of discipline. Over time, your ability to delay gratification, a key marker of emotional and spiritual maturity, weakens. Now, this might sound dramatic, but it's not an exaggeration. These foods are literally designed to override your body's natural signals. You stop eating when you're full. Not anymore. Processed foods silence those cues. You crave nutrition, not with food engineered for shelf life, not life itself. Your ability to really feel hunger, satisfaction, stillness gets hijacked. And once your body is confused, your mind is next. You become reactive, easily overwhelmed, spiritually numb. This is the point where deeper control sets in. You're tired, unfocused, frustrated. You scroll more, pray less. You binge, then feel guilt. You try to reset, then relapse. That cycle is not just poor self-control, it's behavioral conditioning, and someone profits off your exhaustion. These systems aren't broken. They're built to keep you stuck. And the more disconnected you are from your body and mind, the less access you have to your own willpower. The very thing you need to say no, to rise above, to act with purpose. So when I say the devil uses food to control you, I'm not talking in metaphors. I mean that quite literally. He uses your habits, your impulses, and your addictions to separate you from your calling. Not all at once, but slowly through compromise. Because once you're mentally foggy, physically drained, and spiritually distracted, you become passive. And passive people are easy to manipulate. But here's the truth. You were not made to be controlled. You were made to be conscious. And consciousness demands clarity of body, of mind, and of spirit. That clarity begins the moment you realize your fork is not just a utensil, it's a weapon. It can build you or it can break you. The choice ultimately is yours. Let's talk about sugar, and not in the abstract sense. I mean the sweet, addictive, mood-altering substance that's found in nearly everything today, from your morning cereal to your so-called healthy protein bars. Sugar has become so normalized in our diet that we hardly question it anymore. It's the reward after a hard day. the comfort in sadness. Treat we tell ourselves we deserve. But if you start to look closely, not just at what it does to the body, but what it does to the mind, you begin to understand why I say this isn't just about food. This is about control. The enemy doesn't always show up with chaos. Sometimes he shows up in your cravings, subtle, seductive, persistent. Sugar is the perfect vehicle for manipulation because it hits the brain where it's weakest in its pleasure centers. Neuroscience has shown us that sugar triggers a dopamine release similar to cocaine. And just like any addictive substance, the more you consume, the more you need to feel the same effect. That's not pleasure. That's dependency disguised as reward. But here's where it gets deeper. The more dependent you are on sugar, the less emotionally stable you become. Why? Because your mood, energy, and focus begin to ride a roller coaster controlled by your blood sugar levels. One moment you're up, the next you crash, tired, irritable, anxious. And what do you reach for when you crash? More sugar, more quick fixes, more artificial comfort. It creates a cycle where your emotional resilience weakens, your spiritual awareness dims, and your mind is too distracted to engage with anything that requires depth, patience, or clarity. And that's the real danger, not just the physical cost, but the psychological erosion. You stop asking deep questions. You stop noticing the state of your inner world. You become reactive, restless, easily manipulated. The devil doesn't need to drag you into destruction if he can just keep you addicted to distraction. And sugar is one of the most culturally accepted forms of distraction out there. We use it to numb, to avoid, to feel in control when everything else feels chaotic. But ironically, the more we rely on it, the less control we actually have. Now think about what that means spiritually. Self-control is not just a virtue. It's a safeguard. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit because it protects your agency, your ability to act in alignment with truth rather than impulse. But if your body is addicted, your mind becomes foggy and your soul gets quiet. You no longer respond to life with wisdom. You react out of need. That is not freedom. That is bondage in disguise. And it's all the more dangerous because it doesn't look evil. Sugar comes in bright colors and friendly packaging. It's handed out at parties, celebrations, even church events. It's been woven so deeply into our culture that speaking against it almost feels like heresy. But ask yourself, what kind of system rewards you for consuming something that makes you more anxious, more depressed, and less disciplined? That system is not working for you. And the devil, being opportunistic, doesn't need to create these systems. He just needs to use them. If you want your mind back, your energy, your focus, your emotional balance, you have to begin with the very thing that's hijacking those functions. Sugar may seem harmless, but it's a tool, a highly effective one. It softens your resistance, clouds your clarity, and turns powerful people into passive ones. Now, let's move into something that often flies under the radar: seed oils. These are the so-called heart-healthy oils found in nearly every packaged snack, frozen meal, restaurant dish, and salad dressing. Canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, you name it. They're cheap to produce, easy to cook with, and aggressively marketed as modern miracles of nutrition. But behind the health claims lies something far more insidious, a kind of chemical quieting of the body and mind that weakens your resistance from the inside out. To understand the danger of seed oils, you have to look at what they do on a cellular level. These oils are highly processed and unstable. They're extracted using heat and solvents, then deodorized to hide their rancid smell. By the time they reach your plate, They've been stripped of anything natural. And what remains is a product that your body can't properly recognize or regulate. When consumed, these oils become part of your cell membranes. They literally embed themselves into the structure of your body. And the result? Chronic inflammation. Now, I know inflammation might sound like just another wellness buzzword, but let's break it down. Inflammation is your body's alarm system. It's supposed to be short-term, like when you get injured or sick. But when it becomes chronic, low grade, ongoing, it becomes destructive. It starts attacking healthy cells, disrupting your hormones, dulling your nervous system, and exhausting your brain. You feel it as fatigue, brain fog, mood swings, anxiety, even spiritual apathy. And here's where the spiritual dimension kicks in. When your brain is inflamed, your thoughts slow down. Your clarity fades. You become more reactive, less reflective. You're not as alert, not as grounded. The sharpness that helps you discern right from wrong, truth from lie, that sharpness is blunted. And that is not a coincidence. Because when you're not thinking clearly, you're easier to influence. You're more likely to believe what you're told without questioning it. More likely to chase pleasure and convenience than purpose. You drift. You settle. You start living by default instead of by design. And from a psychological standpoint, that is the beginning of learned helplessness. The belief that your choices don't matter anymore. That you might as well keep eating whatever's in front of you because changing your health or your mind or your life feels too overwhelming. That's not a lack of willpower. That's biological sabotage. Think about what that means in practical terms. You could be doing everything else right, reading, praying, setting goals. But if your mind is fogged and your energy is crashing by noon, how far are you really going to get? You're stuck in survival mode. You react instead of create. You numb instead of engage. You don't hear from God because the static in your own body is too loud to listen through. And again, this isn't a conspiracy theory. It's just how the system is set up. These oils are everywhere not because they make you stronger, but because they keep you quiet. Quiet in your body, quiet in your thinking, quiet in your resistance to a culture that wants you passive, dependent, and disconnected. The truth is you were designed for clarity. Not just mental clarity, but moral clarity. Clarity of purpose, clarity of identity, and anything that clouds that, even something as subtle as the oil in your salad dressing, is not neutral. It's a tool, one that works slowly, silently, but effectively. Let's take an honest look at fast food, not just what it is, but what it represents. Because this isn't just about greasy burgers and oversized soda cups. This is about a mindset, a pattern of behavior, a habit that trains your body and your soul to choose convenience over conviction, speed over substance, and gratification over growth. And while it may seem harmless, even necessary in today's busy world, it comes with a hidden cost, one far greater than what you're paying at the counter. Fast food is engineered, not cooked. It's designed in labs, not kitchens. Every texture, flavor, and smell has been perfected to hit the deepest, most primal parts of your brain. The parts that crave salt, fat, sugar, and ease. And once you're hooked, your body starts to associate those artificial cues with safety, comfort, even identity. The problem is that food doesn't nourish you. It stimulates you. It excites you. But it leaves you depleted physically, mentally, and spiritually. Now, here's the psychological shift that most people never talk about. The more you eat food that requires no effort, the more you begin to internalize the idea that life should be effortless, that good things should come fast, That satisfaction should be immediate. But life doesn't work that way. Spiritual growth doesn't work that way. Transformation is slow, uncomfortable, and requires sacrifice. Fast food, by contrast, teaches you to avoid those very conditions. It teaches you impatience, not just in your diet, but in your character. And this is why I say fast food is not just a physical threat. It's a philosophical one. It shapes how you engage with the world. When you consume things that ask nothing of you, you start to expect everything for nothing. You become reactive instead of responsible, passive instead of purposeful. And over time, you stop asking deeper questions. You stop stretching. You stop striving. Worse, you stop caring. Because food affects mood. That's not theory. That's biochemistry. Diets high in fast food have been linked to depression, anxiety, irritability, and attention issues. Why? Because your brain is starving for real nutrients. It's running on empty while being flooded with artificial signals. You feel sluggish but overstimulated, wired but unfocused. And that mental state becomes your norm, so much so that you forget what it's like to actually feel well, to feel sharp, to feel present. And when you live in that fog long enough, you begin to settle for less, not just in food, but in everything. Now zoom out. What happens when a society becomes hooked on fast food, physically and philosophically? We get a culture that prefers scrolling over studying, entertainment over engagement, image over integrity. We start outsourcing our thinking. We avoid discipline. We trade real joy for short-term pleasure. And from a spiritual perspective, that's exactly where the enemy wants you. Overstimulated, undernourished, and spiritually numb. Because when you're numb, you don't resist. You don't rise up. You don't pursue truth with urgency. You become easy to predict and even easier to pacify. And if a system can control your cravings, it can control your choices. It doesn't need to tell you what to do. It just needs to train you to keep reaching for what's easy. That's the trap of fast food. It's not just what it does to your body, but what it teaches your body. And your body is always teaching your mind. If your daily rhythm is built on shortcuts, you will eventually seek them everywhere. In relationships, in work, in faith. But purpose doesn't come quickly. Neither does healing, and certainly not freedom. Let's go a level deeper now, beyond ingredients and into identity, because at a certain point, this conversation stops being about food and starts being about authority. Specifically, who or what is shaping your behavior. You might think you're making your own choices, living freely, eating what you want. But the truth is, most people are not free. They're simply following patterns they no longer question. And many of those patterns were designed to keep them weak, distracted, and dependent. Food is one of the most effective tools for that kind of control because it bypasses logic and speaks directly to your nervous system. What you crave, what you reach for under stress, what you consume when no one's watching, that reveals who's really in charge. If you're constantly reacting to cravings instead of acting from intention, your agency is compromised. You're not choosing, you're complying. This is where addiction begins. Not just the extreme kind we associate with substances, but the quiet, socially accepted kind, the kind that hides behind convenience, emotional eating, and impulse. You don't realize you're addicted because the behaviors feel normal. But the science is clear. The same reward pathways in the brain that respond to drugs are triggered by sugar, processed fats, refined carbs. It's the same loop. Cue, craving, behavior, reward, repeated until it becomes automatic. And here's the psychological cost over time. You stop trusting yourself. You make promises. I'll eat better tomorrow. Just one more cheat meal. This is the last time. And then break them. You start to live in a low-grade state of internal conflict. A part of you wants to change, the other part sabotages. That tension erodes confidence, and eventually it erodes hope. You stop believing that change is possible, that you're capable, that you're strong enough to resist. And once hope is gone, you become passive. That's the turning point. Not when someone takes your freedom by force, but when you quietly surrender it. Not to a dictator or an ideology, but to your own cravings. That is what the enemy counts on. He doesn't need to control your body if he can hijack your habits. He doesn't need to possess your soul if he can program your behaviors. And what better way to do that than through the most repetitive daily ritual you have? Eating. This is why fasting has always been a spiritual discipline. It's not just about going without food. It's about reclaiming dominion over the body. Every time you resist an urge, you remind your brain who's in charge. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, you build strength, and that strength compounds. It doesn't just affect your diet. It spills into your decisions, your emotions, your spiritual life. You become less reactive, more grounded, less controlled, more conscious. But without that discipline, you live in a kind of mental fog, always behind, always tired, always just trying to get through the day. That fog is not just fatigue. It's a sign that something else is making your choices for you. And the longer you stay in it, the harder it is to wake up. So let me put it plainly, if your habits are automated by addiction, your freedom is an illusion. You may feel free because you can eat anything you want, anytime you want. But if you can't say no, then you're not in control. Something else is. So now we arrive at the part that matters most, the turning point. If the first 5 truths reveal how food has been used to weaken you, distract you, and slowly take your power, then this final truth is the invitation to take that power back. Because here's the good news. You're not stuck. You're not beyond repair. And no matter how deep the conditioning goes, you still have the capacity to interrupt it. But it won't happen by accident. It will require a deliberate, often uncomfortable act of rebellion, not against food itself, but against the systems and habits that have taught you to misuse it. Reclaiming your health is not just about eating differently. It's about thinking differently, feeling differently, living from a different center of gravity. You can't keep numbing yourself with fake comfort and expect real clarity. You can't build a life of purpose on a foundation of addiction. At some point, you have to step out of the fog, even if that means going through withdrawal, even if that means feeling things you've been avoiding for years. That's where fasting comes in. Now, I'm not just talking about not eating for a few hours. I'm talking about the discipline of withholding, of saying no, not because you have to, but because you can. Fasting teaches your body to follow your mind, not the other way around. It's not punishment, it's practice. You are training yourself to be still in the presence of discomfort, to face your cravings without bowing to them. And every time you do that, you're sending a message to your nervous system. I'm the one in control here. And when you fast, whether from food, screens, distractions, or indulgence, what happens is profound. Your mind sharpens. Your emotions stabilize. Your spiritual sensitivity returns. You become more present, more alert, more attuned to what actually matters. The noise starts to quiet. The autopilot begins to break. You stop eating just because you're bored, stressed, sad, or overstimulated. You start choosing instead of reacting. That's what real freedom looks like. And it's not just about what you stop doing. It's also about what you start doing. Replacing the artificial with the real. Real food, real rest, real prayer, real community. Things that nourish, not numb. Things that call you up, not pull you down. You were never meant to live a life of constant consumption. You were made to create, to lead, to discern, to stand. But you can't do that if your energy is drained, your brain is fog, and your will is constantly compromised by what's on your plate. That's why this isn't a health talk. It's a wake-up call. Because the devil doesn't need you to fall apart publicly. He just needs you to be too distracted, too tired, too addicted to do anything that actually threatens his agenda. But when you take back your mind, your body, your habits, you become a threat again. You stop floating, you start building. You live with intention. And that kind of person can't be manipulated. So the choice is simple, but not easy. You can keep following the pattern, numbing, reacting, repeating. Or you can interrupt it. You can fast. You can reset. You can start choosing what serves your mission, not just your moment.